there's music from the Spoons, and it is from the album, which I have with me. New Day, New World. Get your copy now. And if you're lucky, maybe, just maybe, you'll get an autograph from Gord or Sandy like I did on the copy of that one. Gord, there were a lot of great songs on this album, and when I asked you which one to play, you specifically said that you wanted to hear Life on Demand. So tell me about that song and why that was the one you picked.
But it's one of the songs that a lot of people might not know, because a bunch of the other songs had videos and we played them live, and we don't play that one very often. And it's not really a pop, it's more sort of a moody, darker song, but it's got the progressive vibe that I like in some of the earlier stuff that we did, like Aria style. It's more arias than some of the other stuff, which is more Televised Romantic Traffic era, And it's got a cool message, but people wanting things immediately, 24 hours a day, nonstop, and going through what we're going through. It's kind of a good song for thought right now. Yeah. It's also one of the songs I co-wrote with my son Matthew. He did a couple of songs.
Awesome.
The other one was Landing Lights, which ended up being a huge song for us. I mean, for video and stuff. So it's kind of cool to feature his talent a little bit.
And I want to get into that. Before we do, I do want to ask you about the New Year's Eve show, which was so cool. And it was, I never put anything past Ed to be able to come up with something. And, here we were trying to figure how are we going to do something for New Year's Eve. And Ed came through big time. I mean, this was a plethora of music stars. And it also featured a full original Spoons lineup reunion.
Yeah.
How cool was that there's Rob and then your original drummer ends up paying $500 for you to play a song as a donation.
Well, and it's really cool because he made the first bid. His wasn't the winning bid. Somebody outbid him for like $750, but he came back to see what a great guy is. He said, I'll still contribute it. Wow. So it ended up making like $12.50 for me to sing that one song at midnight, which was amazing. That's wonderful that we could do that. But the first thing we, of course, joked about is Derek's going to, offer $500 for me not to sing, which that's perfect, Derek. That's like, I said, fine, I'll do that too, whatever you want.
It's pretty rare that a band, because bands go through changes, and you and Sandy have been the rocks of this band from day one, and you've had different people come in and out. But to be able to still have a relationship with the original guys, you don't often see that. It's pretty rare. So what has made it possible for the four of you to still be tight with each other?
One thing is we don't see each other very much. Rob is in New York City, permanently now because of COVID. Derek has been in San Francisco. He married a girl that works high up at Apple. And he's actually in town right now for a short while. Then he's supposed to be going to England. So it's a long distance affair. So it'll last a long time. But you know what? I think now, especially when you read like Rob's posts, we are so appreciative of what we had. Like what an honor and how lucky we were to share that time together. And we forget sometimes ourselves how amazing that was. So right now we're like, anytime we see each other, it's like, it's like a reunion of high school, friends. And we will hopefully see each other this year, because last year, our 40th, was supposed to bring them back for some of the shows, which obviously didn't happen. So this year it should. Like some shows that were canceled last year were being brought over to this year, and they'll be on those for sure. Then maybe we'll start fighting and hating each other. Yeah.
Was there something in particular that kind of tipped the scales to actually make this reunion possible after all this time?
Well, it's all around the 40th anniversary that we had last year. Of course, that's a write-off. That was a year that, to be forgotten. So, we do see each other once in a while. I think the last time before that we were all in the same room was 5 years ago. We got together for Christmas dinner. Oh, no, sorry. What we're talking about. We did another anniversary. I think it was the anniversary of one of our big records or something. And they came out and did a couple of songs. So usually anniversaries, those kind of things will do it. I mean, if they lived in the same city, we might see each other more often, but both of those guys are super successful, in other parts of the world. And so, yeah, they're still friends, but the kind of friend you see like once a year or something. It's a strange thing, but that's how it is. At least we're not like the Police or something like that. So they can't stand to be in the room together, from what I hear.
Gord, when you look back to when you were writing songs with that original lineup back in the day, you're putting an album out, you've got the record company on your case, you've got fans that want to hear new material. You want the songs to be successful, you want people to watch the videos, buy the records and all.
Yeah.
As you're putting this new album together, the mindset obviously has got to be different, right? And you're probably thinking, if we can sell a couple of hundred of these things, then great. I just got this material I want to write. How much was this like a real pleasant, holy crap for you that this new material, because let's face it, Gord, so many bands from the 80s have put out new material. I mean, including Flock of Seagulls that nobody listens to, nobody even really knows about.
Yeah.
This album has done so well for you guys.
You know what? I think it's because we are our own worst critics. At least I am. I'm so critical. I'm not one of these guys who thinks everything they put out is amazing. I meet those people. I'm afraid what I might have thrown away that never got released and it probably would have been okay. Even some of the songs that we put out, I didn't want to because I don't think they were good enough. Like Old Emotion, stuff like that. I was like, what are we doing? This is so wrong, picky with what we put out. And I don't know what it is. I think we're not stuck in the 80s. We're an 80s band. We're not stuck back there. I like to be the kind of band where people will listen to the record and go, wow, this is kind of a cool new band that has some 80s flavors to it, which a lot of bands do anyway now, right? So it's not, we fit right in with that scene. And I'm into current music and styles. I really don't listen to 80s stations or listen to my old Duran Duran records and like that. I find it sad to look backwards that way. I mean, it's nice once in a while, but I like new things, new fresh blood, and it keeps me motivated.
What are your favorite bands right now? Who are you listening to right now?
Oh, geez. I couldn't even name most of them, but there's certain bands I will never get tired of. And they're not new bands actually, but they're not 80s bands either. Like my favorite will always be The Verve, anything that Richard Ashcroft does on the solo even. For a while I thought Noel was a genius in Oasis, and I'm starting to really discover all of Liam's stuff, his solo stuff, which is amazing,
Have you seen that documentary on Amazon Prime on the guys? It's so good.
Yeah. It's so funny how you can see their personalities even when they were little brats at school. Yeah. But the stuff I hear even now, like I just go, wow, like some Canadian bands that just blow me away with the quality of their work. Like we did a show with what are they called? Dear Rouge. Mm-hmm. Is that what they're called? Like amazing. Like they're sort of up there with Metric, Yukon Blonde. I played one of their songs, Saturday Night by Yukon Blonde. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
I showed my store Flock of Seagulls. It's a total, like, I don't say rip-off, but borrowing from that era. Listen to it. It's got the same drum machine, same kind of bass tone and synths. So I love when bands have those flavors that we were part of, So I really
the Killers. There's another one. When the first time I heard the Killers, I heard like, my God, I mean, there's the Cars in what they're doing, right? And of course, the guy from the Killers ended up being the one who inducted the Cars into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So.
And a lot of Springsteen, right? I mean, I think he thinks he's Bruce Springsteen in his storytelling, his big grand American songs, but which is great. He's carrying a cool torch there. Yeah, there's a lot of bands that, and I like really different. I love like really heavy screamo stuff sometimes, So it's weird, but I like it. I don't like sitting around with just an acoustic or guitar quietly. I like to turn things up really loud and rock and stuff, which you would not expect from a Spoon, right? But that's why our music is a lot more energetic and loud live, where on the albums it's kind of toned down. The guitar is low in the mix, but in the live shows, it's like turn everything up,
Where do you see, you bring up live music. Actually, the last live show I was at, I had the privilege of attending, was watching you play with the Spoons in Hamilton, I believe it was, back before they locked us up real tight a few months ago.
Oh, wow. What show was that? I can't even remember. That's like another lifetime.
It was...
that was
you had the two horn players from Colin James's band playing.
That's right, yeah.
And they just absolutely... Yeah. Oh, where was it? It was a little place in Hamilton.
Are you already forgetting? Are you forgetting? You do remember this night, right? This was a few months back.
Oh no, it wasn't the Spoons then. It was like a little little fundraiser with different
Yeah,
artists.
you were playing with
yeah,
Pete
yeah.
Nunn,
Oh, yeah.
Pete Nunn, Sandy. Yeah, that's right. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
That's right.
Yeah,
And Derek was on drums. That's right. Yeah.
And that was
there
even
were
really a
Spoon
show.
songs.
Yeah, that was under like the whole COVID thing, so it wasn't even like free and easy like a real show. People had to wear masks and sit separately, and yeah, I mean the last show that we did was in November, and just to show you how topsy turvy things are, we did the Capitol Theater in North Bay for 2 nights. It's a 1,000-seater, beautiful old Art Deco theater with 50 people each night. 50
Wow.
people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was live streaming, and we're doing another one on March the 5th, actually, from the Oakville Arts Center. But this time, no audience, unless things change. So they're going to pay for us to be there just to play to nobody,
Wow.
you know. But
I mean,
live streaming. But I mean,
you guys got very creative during COVID, and
yeah.
a lot of bands just kind of said, "Ah, screw it." You know, I mean, we'll do some virtual videos and we'll do whatever. What made you decide that, you know what, screw that, we're going to find a way to do it? I mean, you guys performed on a friggin' boat, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, we did a riverboat through Bob Cage and the locks there. We did a rooftop of a building for Canada Day. We did a private island, Stony Lake. We did golf course, and all within the parameters what was allowed, and usually for charities. And it did some really good work. Like, and we were involved in that Back of the Basement thing in the States as the only Canadian band with like Flock of Seagulls and Mike and stuff, and actually made headway with American fans that never heard about us. Like, the guy said, you were the surprise hit of the whole show because people were going, how come I didn't know about these guys? So we were very happy that during COVID, we made some, broke some new ground, especially down there. You know what? I'm that kind of, if I didn't play, like some people are going to think, well, we're going to wait it out. We're not going to play unless we can do our big show, you know? No, we're going to strip it down and still get that magic. And the few people are doing it. I think the same circuit that we were on, there was like Chantal Treviacek was doing it, White Horse, you know, some smaller things. I'd rather be like them and keep busy, you know, and then wait maybe till next summer or the next fall or whatever. I couldn't survive.
Do you have any plans for the upcoming year? Are we thinking outside the box? Yep.
Yes,
Another
well,
rooftop?
First of all, last year was our 40th anniversary. Forget that year. So we're going to make it this year. And there'll be a brand new compilation CD out in the spring, which is interesting because we put one out in 95, but there was a big gap because all the stuff we did with Anthem Records, like Waterline, Time Turns Around, Bridges Over Borders, Alone Tonight, all that stuff was not included because it was Rush's old label and we couldn't get the two publishers to work together. So this will be the first comprehensive, complete 40 years, including some of the new stuff. That'll be coming out. The shows, hopefully, with Rob and Derek are going to be happening with the reunion thing. Another video, because we did 3 videos in isolation. That's another thing we did.
Awesome.
We did video,
Yeah.
right? Which a lot of them went on to win film festival awards. And 2 of them were part of a trilogy. So we're going to finally do the 3rd one in March as well for a song called Beautiful Trap. Yeah, so we got, you got to keep putting goals. I said to the guys in the band, even if you don't have a gig in January, February, let's just make an imaginary one and have something to look forward to. So we started like bantering back and forth about the rider and, what time is, we got to be there. And Johnny, our sound man's going, so let's see, what do you want on the rider? Is it V8 or tomato juice or what is it? Like, it's just something to fool ourselves with.
Gord, on our show last week, Tom and I were talking about, because we're both big Beatles guys, and they're going to be releasing this new Beatles documentary where they found like hundreds of hours of film from the Let It Be sessions, right?
Wow.
And it's all been remastered, and Beatles fans are hearing stuff that's 50 years old that's never been released.
Oh.
And you see a lot of bands finding material. Is there any Spoon stuff that's out there from the day that you guys are sitting on? So why not get it out to your fans?
There's so much of that, and I just moved about a month and a half ago. We moved into a new house, and I came across boxes of stuff, mostly on cassettes. So I've got to be able to get it somehow onto digital form. But some of that stuff was pretty weird, though. This is like the really early, and we were very punky. Think of like a cross between Talking Heads and Devo and all that stuff. Before we became more sort of like, with the aria sound. We were pretty experimental before that. So yeah, we may do that. I don't know what the quality is like. It's gonna be like putting on an old vinyl record. It's gonna be. I don't think this tape hold up. Some of those
That's
tapes are a
what-
bit moldy.
Are any of the masters still available?
No, we never. It was just, I would have no idea where they are. I mean, we found some quarter-inch tape though somewhere, but I'm afraid those things degrade, right? If you put them on a reel to reel, that could be like one play and they're gone. So if you're gonna play it, you better be ready to transfer it to digital at that first play. It might be your last shot to save it. It's like those vampire movies where the sun hits them and they disintegrate into dust. It's kind of like that. So they're gone.
Is there anything that you wrote that maybe the record company kind of put a kibosh to, or a decision was made not to release it, that you look back now and say, I really wish that song had been on one of our albums?
Nah, not really.
Well, that's
Not
good.
really. No, not really. No, it's nothing we really missed. I mean, some of the stories of some of the stuff that was released that never made it into America because of political reasons. That I regret, like Romantic Traffic, Tell No Lies, which were huge hits here and then about to be released in the States, and they got buried by the new record exec, and I mean, stuff like that. That I regret.
Why did that happen?
Well, it was A&M Records, and they finally got to the point. We had done the Talkback album. All Emotions was good, but when we showed them Tell No Lies, Romantic Traffic, which were already starting to be hit in Canada, they went, these are the songs that are going to break you in America. I said, all right, we're ready to go, right? And within weeks or a month, all of a sudden there's a new A&R guy comes in, not only us, but he cleans house because I have a new vision for the label. And not only was it not released by them, we couldn't even get it back. They buried or destroyed them or something.
Oh, wow.
So that was like the most depressing time in my career that I can remember. But luckily we had the success in Canada to come back to. So we just hung on to our Canadian fans. But that could have gone a completely different way. I could be living, but you know what? I was just saying I could be living in a mansion in LA, but maybe not, who knows? You make it big in LA at a young age, you could be dead by now. Who knows, right? So there's a reason. That's why I tell myself so I can sleep at night. Oh man. I was talking to the guys in the band, talking about the Canadian scene and the American scene. We actually have it better here. Like in America, like the Flock of Seagulls guys, the singer's from Liverpool, but he also lives in Florida. They haven't played. We haven't had one gig, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But we probably did like 10 gigs last summer, between private things. And we've had so many festivals and big gigs keep getting moved. There's supposed to be one this month. Obviously, it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So maybe in March, which is not going to happen. Then they move it to May. Then, it's like, and then some 80s cruises, which were booked last year, they moved them to this year. No, now next year, So that's, in that way, we've always been really lucky, whether with a label or now myself having Flock of Seagulls and the Spoons, that I have two worlds that I can sort of, move back and forth between, two dimensions, really.
Gord, you were talking about the sound, and it was a really cool, unique sound when the Spoons came out. Now, if you talk to artists, and we've talked to a lot of young artists these days, and a lot of them, they know going into writing a song, like it starts with a beat, right? And it's all computerized, and then they build a melody around it, and they kind of layer, and all of a sudden they've got a song. Were you more just an acoustic guitar kind of guy, like writing something on a guitar and then it builds into a song?
Yeah. I was never a guy who started things with a beat or a loop or something, because we didn't really have that back then.
Yeah. So how do you? Because when a song's an acoustic song, it could be anything. It could end up being a rock song. It could end up being a punk song. So was there a conscious effort as you're writing stuff like Old Emotions that you're like, no, this is going to have this kind of sound when it's done?
Nothing. I have there's nothing conscious about what I do. And Rob said that once about me. He said he's worked with a lot of people. He's the most unique songwriters I've ever met. I have no structure. I have no thing. It's totally just by instinct, And usually I would have an electric. A couple of things I wrote on acoustic guitar, but concept works like a good example is what I find tells songwriters is sometimes abandon the instrument that you're comfortable on, because your hands always go like right to the G chord, because you kind of it's muscle memory, right? So do something that you don't like. Best example, I've told this story many times, is Nova Heart. I'm not a keyboard player, but I borrowed a keyboard from Rob, and the very first thing I went da 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 da, because 3 notes, simple, doesn't take a brainiac to do, but it was so simple that it was very hooky and it worked, And another example is, even as a guitar player, try writing on a bass guitar. which and a good example is the song Arias and Symphonies, which is one of the most complex songs we've ever written. And it's got so many chord changes in it. But because I wrote it with only root notes, I didn't have to worry about chords. I filled the chords in later, even though they're in my head. So, for example, you know, there's a lot of changes. Like, I was on the bass, I was going. You know, even though later on, I was like, like full chords. But as I was writing, I was just playing single notes. Like, is it hard to be the kind of man you want to be? Can you hear the guitar in there?
Yeah.
It's like one note.
Oh yeah.
And then later on, the band can figure out the chords, whatever. But it lets you write really quickly and just get a groove going, like by yourself. And it's nothing like a single note guitar. You know, it's sort of. I'm trying to think of another song I wrote like that. Say on like the album before the Static Transmission, the song that Sandy sings called "Escape with You." Same thing. I just had this cool bass line on the guitar. You know that. Stupid little line that sounds like a kid could write, right? But it's so like raw and real that it's fun to create that way. Instead of worrying about playing a G minor or G minor seventh or a D suspend, you know, whatever. Get right down to the bare bones of what you do, and especially if you've written a long time. I always said I wish there was a switch you could switch as a songwriter where you forget everything you know, and you're like a beginning songwriter. You know, when your first ideas are really fresh and raw, and that's what that makes you do. And the other thing is, I get a guitar like that one over there, the Jazz Mat or the Jaguar. And it's a Squire Jag, so it's really hard to play. It's full of buzzes. It's really flawed. But when I play or write on that, it makes me feel like I'm rediscovering the guitar. Instead of having a pristine Stratocaster or Les Paul, which is perfect action and everything. I got to work at it, right? And it's great. So those are kind of cool things you find out by accident. You got to reawaken that inner childlike approach to songwriting sometimes, you know. And it could be a guitar like that, you know, like a pawn shop guitar or something.
So it is amazing hearing that perspective. And it's funny for me, I put myself through university as a musician, but like in the 90s, it was a hard go. And I gravitated towards the restaurant industry. Yeah. And I always hated my writing as a writer. But after spending about 10 years away and not playing the guitar, not playing the bass, not playing anything, I came back to instruments, and I found that one of the things I thought I might have been doing wrong all the time is I played guitar, and so I wrote the songs on the guitar. And the second time through with music for me, it's wonderful hearing you say that, because I pick up the bass and I write a song on the bass. Barry lent me his 12-string last week, and I wrote a song on the 12-string, and just that step to the left, that trying something different, a slightly different instrument, a slightly different approach, and just opening those doors. Yeah. It's amazing hearing you talk about that. And I'd love to kind of delve in a little bit deeper and ask you, like, who are your, like, from a songwriting perspective or from a playing perspective, who are the guys that lit your fire, that got you moving and thinking in these ways?
Oh, geez. I mean, like I just said, I like a lot of that Brit rock, the Manchester sound, that kind of things. But growing up, man, I grew up in prog rock, which is totally, I don't know. But it kept us away from disco and stuff in the 70s, right? Again, it was the alternative. It was even before, stuff like real heavy metal. I mean, there were some heavier bands like the early Black Sabbath and stuff, which I love too. I love the early stuff. They really, War Pigs or whatever. But that I always like that darker stuff. And that's why when we put Arias out, it wasn't your typical poppy, like whip it good. It was more Aria, more sort of grand and big. And so I would like all those bands, Ultravox, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Simple Minds, all that kind of stuff. But as a kid growing up, man, my very first rock idol kind of guy was Alice Cooper. Like, I don't know how that happened. Yeah. But if you listen to one of his albums, it's actually an epic album, I think, is Billion Dollar Babies.
Totally.
It's, forget about everything you think you know about Alice Cooper. It's like, it's got some really, big, grand, beautiful, like Hello Hooray, and like unbelievably orchestrated masterpieces. It's not just like I'm 18 or whatever it is, or 17. No. I was growing up, that's the stuff I listened to. I wasn't listening to the Beach Boys or or the happy, hey, you know, it was always like the little edgier stuff. And I like the old Bowie stuff and Todd Rundgren and the old Queen. They always be on at the end of like Don Kirshner's rock concert or something, or you know, what's the midnight special with Wolfman Jack? Remember those shows? They have all the perky acts earlier on. They have the Osmonds and they have the Eagles, but at the end of the show, they bring out some guy in a weird costume like Bowie or something and freak everybody out. But that's what I would wait for, and that would ignite my brain.
Well, it's interesting. Two names you mentioned, and two totally different approaches to songwriting. You mentioned David Bowie, and then you said the Beach Boys. And Brian Wilson, like he would hear everything in his head. He would hear every instrument, every chord change, how the vocal melody. This would all just appear in his brain, and then he would put it out to the musicians he was working with, which for the most part wasn't even the Beach Boys. It was whatever you call that group of musicians. And then you look at David Bowie, where like he would just cut pieces of paper with phrases and throw them into a box and pull them out, and there's his lyrics. So for you, I mean, you mentioned like having like a little bass line that you're playing. Is a melody coming to your head right away, or are you?
Yeah, some people like to have lyrics to go off of. I make the lyrics fit the melody afterwards, and that's another thing I tell songwriters to don't worry about words right away. Like I remember even with the early days of the Spoons playing like the little clubs like Layers Hideaway or The Edge. Some of the songs weren't even done yet, and I would just make up words. I had this sort of strange language, but back then it was the '80s, right? You could get away with it. Like it'd be David Byrne, I'd be like, say I didn't have words for Artie Zippy yet. I'd be like, I'd be singing like, Ishmael smell, to see the sun inside, like just like kind of gibberish. People are like, yeah, he's just rocking out. Like I would, and because it was almost like, you ever heard of like in the old turn of the century, they had stuff like automatic writing mediums, like they'd put a pen on paper and then they would just start writing, like almost like from like a spiritual world or something. It wasn't like that, but you kind of let stuff come from your subconscious that way, that if you sat down and you studied, other people's lyrics, and you probably come up with something very sort of trite, but this comes like from someplace weird, like inside you. So I'd be going like a song like Romantic Traffic. I remember not even having those words really, but going, and I think probably a car went by the club outside and I went, stop in traffic, and go, and so the traffic word popped into my mind because of the moment, right? So if you can do it, if you have a luxury, let your surroundings, your mood that day, what's on TV, let it soak into that moment. Let it be like a sponge. You don't have to be the best writer in the world or a poet or something. You can do that too. But, look at Beatles. You love the Beatles. Like a lot of their stuff, you read it, go, that's not really making sense. Or it's like, but you hear it, it's magic, right? It's just the way the words flow together. It's like train of thought. It's really unforced. And if you can get that at a regular, without having to work at it, then you got something good.
At what step in the process would you bring the song to Sandy and Derek and Rob and say, okay, this is what I've got? Or would you have something raw and just start jamming and working on it in studio together? What was that process like?
I think in the old days more, I would have the whole thing done. And you're talking about Brian Wilson, I have all the parts worked out. And if somebody had a little part to add, I was open to that. But I was kind of tyrant about it a bit. I think
would you literally tell Sandy that this is the bass line I want you to play, or would you kind of and she was cool with that?
But then later on, some of her bass parts are hooks in themselves.
Yeah,
like think of Smiling Winter. That's so that's like a part of the song, right?
Well, or like a Romantic Traffic, right? I mean, you got that little guitar, but that little bass line is such a hook, right?
Yeah. So she's definitely came up with all that stuff, and she's to me still one of my favorite bass players because she has a lot of melody in her bass playing. It's not just like I'm playing like it. She would do a lot more with it, right? But now it's a bit more loosey goosey. Like if I have a song idea, I'll just play the rough idea for everybody and say, what you got? Like, what can you do to make it better? You get more relaxed as you get older as a writer and stuff. So and you kind of want that. Like a group, friend vibe. You want everybody in on it and sharing. And back then, it's like me against the world kind of thing. As a young songwriter,
When has the Spoons, like when has your happy time? You guys have been playing for years. When has the happiest time in the band been? Is it the most successful time? Is it back in the '80s, or is it now, and playing in this wide open environment and doing what you want, and following your passions and being more relaxed?
Yeah. They all have good things, like when you're there. But I can say, before I say anything else, I want people say, "Oh, the '80s, they're amazing." When you want to be there, no. I like exactly where I am now in my life, and I'm glad I did that. But even this last summer, I was saying to Sandy, it's amazing how, especially me playing with Flock and Seagulls, I've done some amazing stuff. Like the year before, we did like the biggest '80s show in Vegas ever, like 15,000 people outside. We did the Greek Theater in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
We're supposed to be back there again this last year, right? And those are unbelievably magical moments. Like you're just living your dreams, right? But then this last summer, we did some shows where there were small things. Like when we did that thing with Bob Cage and going on a boat through the locks. And we stopped at a couple of the long-term care places, and old people were coming out and trying to dance with their walk. It sounds really hokey, but I came home. I came out of there and had this really warm feeling. Like that was magical. It was so, on its own small term, it was wonderful. It was a memory, and like it was and doing an island and boats pulling up and then raining and everybody hiding under their tarps, and we got out again. It was like a little mini Woodstock, and they all have little memories that were as big as some of the big shows that we did.
Gord, you guys did a remix of Nova Heart, and it's a real cool, and it's more a modern spin on it and stuff like that. Of course, everyone's still going to, go back to the original one, but are there any songs that you released that you listen back now and say, I wish I could have recorded that differently. I wish we could have mixed it differently. Like, is there anything that you listen back to now and I love the song, I just wish we could have done it a little bit differently, the way we recorded it?
You know what? Not now, but I'm one of the guys that every album we put out, the moment it comes out, I go, oh, I wish it could be better. You could do better. It's not right. But as you look back, you go, no, it was right for its time. It was good. The only thing I would like to do is that the last two albums we did, New Day, New World, and more so the one before, Static Transmission, are just drum machines. And I would love to remix them with Chris McNeil back and do them with real drums. That's the only thing I would change.
Mm-hmm.
Bring that real drum element, because it was kind of cool rediscovering the drum machine. But now I'm kind of feeling like I want the band vibe, more of the band, because when we play them live, they're even better than on the record, I think. So that's the only thing I would change, really. I think
when you're working with a producer, and like you said, kind of like Brian Wilson, you had this vision of what you wanted the song to sound like. Were there times where you had to you wanted to step over what the producer wanted to do with the song because, listen, this is my song, this is my vision?
No, we work with all amazing people. Working with Daniel Waugh at the beginning, and John Punter, Nile Rodgers, Bob Rock, Tom Termuth, like big names, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we were just happy and honored that we had these people. Even though each one of them, we had to sometimes change our perspective a little bit. Like Nile Rodgers, for us, when we started working with him, I was thinking, like, what? We're coming from the British synth vibe to what? Canadian, American, R&B funk kind of producer kind of guy. But in the end, it worked out great because that's when he did Bowie and In Excess and stuff. So he was changing his perspective as well. So we met at the right time. But no, we always synced up pretty well.
Putting together an album like that, it's kind of something that seems to have gone by the wayside with digital. Everybody can record their lines in their own basement and send it in. It seems to be being done on a much smaller scale these days. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or are there still people out there making these massive albums with great producers?
I think there must be, because I think there must be, because I miss the smell of the old big machines, the big 2-inch tape. There's a smell off those tapes and the vibe and the buzz of the machinery. And now you walk in and there's a laptop or something. So, there's no magic anymore, right? And then in our day, like at least in the 80s, they were still splicing tape for edits.
Yeah.
Like cutting it. Like, what the hell? It's like, what? The master that was John Punter, who did our Symphonies album and Nova Heart. He worked under George Martin. When we recorded the Arias album at Air Studios London, George Martin walked in with his white shirt and his sleeves rolled up and shook all our hands and said, "Hey guys, welcome to my studio." And as a bunch of kids were like, "Oh, whatever," but now I'm going, "Oh my God," I shook George Martin's hand. But those are the old days of doing things. He worked with Procol Harum, with the early John Cougar, coming up through the ranks, doing stuff like, Japan and Roxy Music. And that was the way they did things back then.
What's it like when somebody posts an old picture of the Spoons and, you've got your mullet and Sandy's, what do they call that? Crimping the hair? You know?
Yeah.
Like, is it
It's
almost
good.
like looking at a different person, or is it like you can totally?
It makes you laugh and it makes you appreciate that you're where you are now, right? But we all did crazy things back then. That was the 80s, right? I mean, people said, "Oh, you look at you wore eyeliners." Yeah, so did our accountant. You know, everybody had an eyeliner back in the 80s. Remember that movie Rockstar with Wahlberg?
Oh, phenomenal movie.
Yeah.
Like you worked in an office, right? Wearing eyeliner. It was like a different vibe back then. It was all about theatrics and glam and bam and whatever. It was like different world. So, you know, it's easy. I think right after the 80s, when the 90s kicked in and grunge, we're all a little embarrassed, like, oh my God. Because the music then was so real all of a sudden. It was the grassroots, stripped down, raw. So anything from the excessive, you know, the 80s was like embarrassing, right? But as time went on, I said, no, it wasn't really. It was flamboyant. It was like a new renaissance, you know? Like, think of all the different renaissances we've had through the decades, you know? Like, they were flamboyant and had, you know, think of in Florence with their masks and weird gowns and, you know, the Victorian age, you know, we all go through our times of like puffy collared shirts and stuff. It just comes around again, right?
Do you see that happening again in music? Because we haven't had. I mean, the last big movement I can think of, maybe the emo sort of thing, Fall Out Boy. You can maybe Linkin Park, and you know that was part of a movement in the early thousands. But there really hasn't been that breakout scene, that huge explosion. Yeah. Are we past that? Like, has music gotten to a point where that's not going to be a thing anymore, or is there?
Is there anything left? Is there any new thing left to do?
Is there ever going to be another great rock band again? You know, for a while, the last guys who held on were like David Grohl was like every award show with his, like, you know, he was the last one of the rock world, or a bit of, same with Metallica. They'd be the last band. Like, where are the bands now? There's no guitar gods that the general public knows about. It's always great players. There's no guitar gods. There's no like excess over the top rock bands.
I'd be remiss if we didn't mention your son Matthew, because I've had a chance to get to know him, and he's just a brilliant kid. And what I really love about him is that, you know, he could have just followed your path and got into mainstream music, but instead he said he wanted to make soundtracks. And I've listened to some of his stuff, and it's awesome stuff. Were you at all surprised that that's the route that he wanted to go? And how encouraging are you for him to kind of go this route? Because maybe it's like they say, right? You either have to be so down the middle of the path or so far off. If you're anywhere in the middle, you're screwed, right? And I think that he's doing a really cool thing that not a lot of young people are doing right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. And you can still write a great pop song. Like we did the ones on the Spoons album, and like Life on Demand and Landing Lights. Those are all his keyboard parts and stuff. But he's, ever since he started playing the piano, even like a 7-year-old, he's always been very moody and introspective. Like, he'd be doing this stuff. I'm like, where's that coming from? He's like possessed or something. Or we go see a movie like Harry Potter, and he wouldn't remember the exact melody, but he'd get that vibe with that theme going, just without thinking, without any lessons, without any training. So I think it's in him, that sort of depth of emotion. And he can go from something like, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean, Hans Zimmer style thing, to very stripped down, single note kind of atonal stuff. And then you get very sort of modern or folky, whatever. You can go all over the place depending on what mood you want, you know. So I hope you get any young filmmakers out there, get in contact with Matthew Deppe and work together. I think you'd be very happy.
Let me ask you, what's it like playing with them? Like, from a father to a son. I'm down here playing bass with my 9 and 10-year-old, and I'm hoping someday that maybe down the road. What's it like for you?
It's totally him, because as a kid, when he started playing piano, and never with lessons, just because fooling around, I try to teach him some spoon stuff. And he went, no, Dad, no, he wasn't interested, right? But then years later, I would hear him, and he'd do his own take on a song of ours. Like, take a song like 1 in 10 words, just a perky 80s song. He made like an opera out of it. Da, 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 and on the piano. And so it stuck with him, right? He must have been listening, because I'm sort of the same kind of writer, very sort of darker and deeper. And so I appreciate that stuff, you know? And I tell people now, I mean, I've worked with a lot of people. I think he's probably my favorite co-writer I've ever worked with. Like,
that is incredible to say.
He should, anybody who needs to write an album or something, sit down with Matthew. He won't ever finish a song for you, but he'll give you the beginnings of 10 great songs that you go, oh my God, where did that come from?
Gord, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. Always great to get your perspective. And by the way, when music does resume live, I do have a request. Can you please play the rhythm?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say live, but you're going to do it for me now. Even better.
See, there's an example. We're talking about old things over. Those chords are the old 50s progression, like. It's like an old progression from way back, right? But you put some drum machines around it and some weird guitars and chorus, and all of a sudden it's new again. So,
and maybe that's why that song relates to me so much, because I do like the 50s and 60s sound, and maybe subconsciously I didn't even realize that that chord progression was something that, you know, makes me feel a certain way. And that's why when I hear that song, and
it's perfect for that song, because the rhythm is kind of an analogy for your life. So it kind of looks at life like a song, at the beginning and the end, and we lose someone, and the needle skips across the record, and you know, it's like running traffic. I use traffic as an analogy. This one is a song, like a song. You come and go, and you listen to it again, and leave it for a while, and then how you grew up. So that nostalgia of that 50s chord progression probably works really well for that reason. So yeah, I didn't know that when I wrote it. I just figured that out now.
Man, we could literally do this all day, but you know, we must move on. But Gord, again, thank you so much, and
thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you in person sometime in 2021.
No, you will for sure.
Again, 'cause when the record stops, it's over, it's over. I want